I always say sales is the first date, and then the implementation is the start of that relationship where the retention, it's a make or break type of moment. You have to be proactive. And the biggest problem I see in that part of the customer journey is teams are just not proactive enough. They're typically reactive and they're not strategic in being proactive.
Well, Jeff, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
And I'm drinking coffee, which
appropriate for the show. So yeah, I appreciate you joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I've always considered myself a closer, so I'm glad people are recognizing that. So
there you go. Yeah, we all have a little closer in us, right? Because whether you're in sales or marketing, you're still in some function.
Everybody's in sales, Sam. You know that.
Exactly. So obviously, if you look at your career history, you've worked at some really reputable and recognizable SaaS companies. You've been in-house helping those organizations to scale and grow, and mostly from a focus of retention of existing accounts and growing those. And then you decided to go and start your own consultancy, and now you're running this Infinite Renewals as a consultancy. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey of how you got started and how this genesis for this new company you're running?
Yeah. And I won't go back into the old school stuff, but I mean, part of it is when I was at a company that's now Oracle, we were bought a few years after that, but there was no customer success team, right? And my team was the professional services team, and we would put stuff on their sites on premise and then stay engaged with them, and we had a continual work all the time going on. Mm-hmm. And the joke was every 3 years, the salespeople would drive up in their BMWs with a 3-year renewal contract and be on their way, ask us how everything's going, right? So I bring that up because, even back in that time, we didn't have all of this data, which is pretty much the only difference with SaaS, except for you can disconnect a lot faster, I think, with SaaS sometimes. But and we had to use certain ways of finding out if the customer is being successful using your software, which is ultimately how you have retention, which is making sure that people are using it and getting results. So learn that way back in the day. Then as things moved into SaaS, we were able to see usage numbers and see how people were using it, and we were able to prompt them a little bit more. And I was responsible for a few years of just getting implementation teams up and running. I had this philosophy that someday a book will come out called Retention Starts in Implementation. Mm-hmm. And that is, it's just like the first date, and then you have your relationship. And that's what I always say, sales is the first date, and then the implementation is the start of that relationship where the retention sort of, it's a make or break type of moment, right? And I always say, if you were going to get married and you had the band was terrible at your reception, and you booked an overnight, and then you showed up in a discount car that broke down on the side of the road, like that's a crappy way to start a marriage, and that's also a crappy way to start a relationship. And so we try and make sure that the relationship starts off in a good way, and then doing a lot of the best practices along the way to keep retention high, right? And really focusing on two metrics. One, I believe, is far more important than the other. That is GRR. And a lot of people look at NRR, but we are big believers in really bumping up GRR, because if you're doing really well at your upsells, you can kind of hide your churn. And so that's sort of the main focus that we've been doing for a few years now.
Most certainly. And obviously, like you said, I think the SaaS industry has a lot more KPIs that are easily trackable because people are in an application moving their mouses and entering data. Utilization is there, but sometimes that's not as clear in a service industry or any other businesses, right? Where it doesn't have that kind of data.
Right.
But obviously, talk to us a little bit, because I know big organization, especially any organization, especially in the early days, your growth is coming from acquisition of new logos. That's where you spend most of the energy. And then almost, I would say now more and more companies are probably a little bit more proactive about customer success and retention, but mostly the logo, right? New logo acquisition is the goal. Like, what is that? Like, I've heard all kinds of metrics about it's like 5 times more expensive to acquire clients and retain. What are, at least from your own experience, can you share maybe some KPIs or metrics of what is the actual value of investing into retention?
Well, you definitely hit upon it with the, if you look at your customer acquisition costs, right,
Mm-hmm.
and if you looked at your churn rates and what they actually cost the company in terms of the acquisition and the marketing funnel, and then the staff to go out and get all those, it's actually, it compounds a lot higher than your actual what your churn is. And I can send some info because we did like an hour presentation on this and we covered this topic like down to the spreadsheet level in
Mm-hmm.
depth. But it's definitely a compounding factor, which is why we're really focusing in on that. There are some great benchmarks that are out there where you can go in, like a benchmark it, where you can go in, you can say, this is our type of actual contract value. This is our ARR, and these are the types of people that we're selling into, and this is and then get really good metrics. But anything over 90% in your GRR is where you should be at the bottom level, and then just kind of going up, obviously hundreds to the top. But for, I would say, sales led, right? In we can get out of SaaS or things like that, but anything, the reason why I say that is because if it's PLG or if it's e-commerce, anything with a reduced barrier to entry or qualification and an easy way to cancel is always going to bring that down by about 10 points or so, like that. So you see this a lot with startups where they just kind of cast a wide net, and whoever wants to sign up, we just need logos, right? And then suddenly, we see some of our customers, their average contract value is $50,000, but then they have a high churn from these customers that signed up back in the day for like $1,000 to $3,000. And so we're usually working with companies to say, let's not even count non-ICP churn as churn, essentially. Like that, they're not a number that you should focus on. On that example, we've got a customer, you have those founders that they don't want to give up any customers at all. They're right. Like everybody, we don't want to lose one. And I'm like, so we're currently like spending all of our resources going after these $1,000, $2,000 a year customers. And at the same time, we're not able to expend the resources for our 50,000, 100,000, $1 million contracts because we're chasing down these little ones. And so you have to kind of have those realization. There's more of a strategy that we get into. I just realized I'm talking a lot on this, but it's having your appropriate service level tiers mapped out, right? You certainly, from your marketing funnel and your sales way of going about things, have your tiers in the way that you sell into them. And it's almost a straight mapping. There's some differentiation, but you can't give the same service level to all of your customers. Unfortunately, it's just that way, right? The good news is now with some of the newer tools that are out there and things like that, you can still pay a lot of attention to your your SMB, your mid-market, your things where you normally can't afford a one-to-one mapping between a resource and that company. I don't want to bore you and talk about some of those subjects, but it's getting easier now. Whereas before it was like, okay, let's go hire a ton of CSMs to go maintain these relationships because we don't want to get dinged on the churn. And it just became sort of upside down in your unit economics on how to satisfy a lot of these mid-tier or lower tier customers.
Yeah. And I think, talking about retention is one is definitely having a much better customer experience and support team that gives them the help that they need. The other thing, what I'm seeing, especially companies like HubSpot, where we do have an actual contract in place, but there's also a usage-based products that you can add on. We just recently added on their AI feature, which is a Breeze Intelligence, with some added credits that is on a per usage basis model. Yeah, it's a self-serve model. You just go and buy it yourself. You don't need to even talk to a CSM. So, and I think part of what I'm also seeing in the SaaS world is they're making it super sticky for you to kind of stick with that product because you get so deeply integrated into that organization's tool set. And now it's like, I can't just get out of it, right? Like it's like rip and replacing a CRM is not as easy as, maybe you can get out of maybe a sales enablement tool that you use for 5 SDR, you might just say,
Right,
okay,
and we see those in implementation too, right? If you have an implementation where it's like, give us your user list and everybody's all set, right?
Mhm.
Then yeah, it's a great, easy implementation, but you're also very easily replaceable, right?
Mhm.
Whereas if you're like an ERP where you go through 6 months or a year of
Mhm.
hardwiring and configuring and integrate, because you have to do, a hub and spoke model of integrations with all these other vendors and everything. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're probably going to be in there for a while.
Yeah.
Also, you need to focus your renewals activity and your satisfaction activity a lot earlier on in the contract, because
Mhm.
since it takes another like 6 months to replace you, they're going to make that decision earlier to replace you versus
Mhm.
the standard, what I call customer success drunk dialing, which is, hey, you're up for renewal this month. Let's have a EBR and talk about things.
Mhm.
You're already done in that scenario, right? So,
Yeah. So you're seeing more and more of these SaaS companies going toward a usage based, some sort of a flat written, flat fee plus a usage model, and I think that's becoming more and more common. Like, where is that
I'm
genesis for
not
that?
actually seeing the usage models as
Mm,
much.
yeah.
I work a lot more with enterprise. So, we
Hmm.
do well. I definitely have a lot of high volume vertical SaaS elements as well too.
Hmm.
I there has been a sort of a little bit of a blowback on usage and consumption models recently,
Hmm.
um, from at least from where I stand,
Hmm.
especially since people are viewing that as like an upsell model.
Hmm.
I am seeing more. I've seen more of the seat-based models, to be
Hmm.
honest with you. And here's your new module, but it's all seat-based. Well, I can't speak, seats-based. I definitely do have customers with consumption models, but I don't see it like as overtaking the seat model now.
Hmm.
But again, we're not working with a lot of those super fast transactional sign up and go
Hmm.
um, types of organizations that may be more of a consumption model.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm saying is that obviously, I'm sure if you've been keeping up with HubSpot, they've changed
Mhm.
so many of their pricing in the recent months,
Oh,
right?
I'm a customer. I totally get it.
Yeah, right. They always had just like a flat fee, unlimited user. Then they added on the user.
Yep.
Then they now have also the usage, which is always they had it for contact tier. Plus now they're adding it for all these additional AI enhancements and enrichment.
Yep.
There's also another other usage fee. It becomes very complicated when you actually, as a buyer on your end, you're like, I have no idea what this actual contract is going to be
Exactly.
at the end
Right.
of year, right? Because you're just randomly signing up for something with not having any clear thing, which is kind of also where companies like Zoom Info is going toward too. You still have like a license of certain some receipts,
Right.
but then you have the hey, you get this many contacts or whatever you want to call it, right? Credits, and
Right.
then if you go over, you got to buy more.
Right.
I think it is like you said. I mean, the fear of the buyer is the uncertainty of what this could actually end up costing,
Right.
which could also delay deals
The
because.
ballooning of costs, I've seen people are fine with that model if they can always see, like I think you mentioned either Crunchbase or Zoom Info, like, you see it, it's right up there. Like, this is,
Mhm.
you've used 15 of your credits, you've got
Mhm.
15 left or things like that. The classic, you've got 4 quarters to go to the arcade and you can choose what to pay for. But I don't, on you see that with like the Stripe. Again, they're more on the commercial, the almost the commerce model, where you see these with your Stripes and
Mhm.
your API models where you can get that many queries and X, Y, and Z. And we listen, one of the first SaaS companies that had a ProServe model was when I was at Bright Cove,
Mhm.
and we were based on usage as well too.
Mhm.
And one of the gotchas that we always bumped into is we always had to monitor usage, because
Mhm.
otherwise, somebody has a big event and then suddenly you have to reach out to them and say, hey, you owe us another couple thousand. And
Mhm.
people are like, that's not what I budgeted for. Now everybody's in a bad mood because they have to go back and talk to their CFO and get
Mhm.
more budget. And again, you just don't want to surprise people.
Yeah.
So I'm not
We
Mr.
we we
GTM,
had yeah
hopefully.
we had a pretty similar experience with the Wistia.
Oh
So
yeah.
Wistia, we're one of those grandfathered account from very back in the day, and we had unlimited videos. And then I think it was probably about 2 years ago they went from unlimited to per video model
Yep.
plus the actual. I don't know what they call actually, kind of similar to the viewership model
Yep.
where you can get this many views or something like that. I'm sure they send us emails announcing that change, but we didn't know about it. But then
Right.
we
So,
got this surprise monthly bill that was not very
Right,
So
because they're using. I mean, I don't probably edit all this out, but but they're selling another service on top of that, so they have to monitor their costs. Right,
mhm,
they're having to go through like an Akamai or something like that. So they're
mhm.
basically, it's kind of like pricing out Amazon or whatever your web services architecture is into your usage model as well too. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we certainly understand is there's cost of like the
yeah,
typical assumption when it comes to SaaS world is like, oh, adding an additional user, there's no incremental cost. Like you have the platform, you have the tech stack,
right,
you just add another additional user, but there's obviously some costs associated with storage and all of those things,
yeah. Yeah.
which is what I think they're trying to pass on. But sometimes from a customer side, it just, it doesn't settle well with
Yeah,
you,
when you're
right?
going through an enterprise buying cycle, you don't want the gotchas, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to take this to go see what Salesforce is doing these days, but like that's a good model to look at
Hmm.
for what we're talking about. I feel like they'll get you on all the other modules and everything else like that,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure how they're doing their usage thing right
Yeah,
now.
one of the things that I don't like at all is the support being an actual add-on service too, because I've seen where like some companies like, oh, support is not included. You get email support or you just get a knowledge base article, but if you want support, you got to pay up more. Like sometimes you feel like, come on, if you're gonna sell me the software, have some level of support, right? Which is
Yeah, I actually was just talking about that this morning. Uh, when you definitely need support, right? Like
mhm,
support should not be a new charge, but
mhm,
there are different SLAs that in response times and level of help. You see it on the inverse. I see it a lot with my customers where they sell to SMB, but they also sell to enterprise. And everybody
mhm,
always thinks enterprise are the ones that need all these add-on services and everything, and
mhm,
it's not. They're going to assign. They're big enough that they can say, this is your new role, you're going to do this, and they can consume it and they can get into it.
mhm,
It's the SMBs and the small companies that need a higher service layer because they're too scattered, they're
yeah,
doing a million different jobs, and they're the ones who wind up draining your organization.
mhm,
And that's why they're saying you may be paying this, but you need a service level that's like this. And that can do two things. You could say, like, crap, I don't want to do that. So I
mhm,
need to either hire somebody or I need to kind of like, pick my battles or maybe move on to something else. Um,
yeah,
so I actually am for that because you should have a level. I like charging things if you have a free layer that most people are good with. And
mhm,
then, and you can say, look, here's our normal support things. And then here's you're asking these many questions.
mhm.
We have a model for you. And then we typically charge those as recurring revenue services. So it actually adds to your ARR. So,
Mhm. Makes sense. So I know you mentioned earlier, like SaaS has a lot of the KPIs and metrics measured in the back end that gives you a lot more visibility on the user's activity. But in the service world, it's not that clear cut, right? So what are some strategies that you use typically when it comes to retention on the SaaS world that could be translated into a service industry or any other businesses that can actually invest into retention?
yeah, or there's still tons of on-premise in non-SaaS things, or there's still plenty of, especially for startups and things like that, where they're not tracking usage,
Hmm.
because usage is the thing that that's the difference is that
Hmm.
you have something on your server and you can go log and see what people are doing with your application. But
Hmm.
I think that's only one factor. It's a little bit more of a bigger, grand scheme of things, but people went out and they bought your software to solve a problem.
Hmm.
They need to do a job every day, or they have people that do a job, and they are getting KPI'd on those. And
Hmm.
so, find out what those are, and then when you are talking with, and that could be a service, that could be a product. It does not matter. But
Hmm.
you're going to use my team, or you're going to use this product to do a certain thing that you can't do right now. And how
Hmm.
are you going to be measured on that? How are you going to measure that this spend was effective? And so that's why there's a newer wave of people out there saying you need to focus on outcomes, which you absolutely need to do.
Hmm.
Instead of just focusing on usage and features. And so I'll go back to when I was in an on-premise situation. We'd go, we're powering, 90% of the top 100 e-commerce websites out there. So we'll call up one of those companies and we'll say, how are things going, right? You used to have to, you didn't have a good search, you didn't have a good merchandising model, you didn't have X, you didn't have Y, or it would cut in. How are things going now? Oh, great, our average order size is up, our boom. And you have those conversations with people, and then you log those things, and then you go back. And the other problem that most people do is that there's somebody out there selling at this level and they're selling into this level. And then it gets pushed down to here, and you've got basically like two administrative functions, people working with each other. And then nobody's going back up and reporting into these people in a timely basis. Again, they might do it when they're like, oh, we're up for renewal, we should probably have that meeting. So you just need to make sure that people at all levels are understanding that they are getting their KPIs or they're getting the ROI that they signed up for, or maybe they're not. That's usually the customer's problem. They usually have not given you or flipped on the modules or paid attention to what they need to do. And so if you identify those things early, it's like, hey, look, you signed up to do 3 things. Right now, you're only doing one of them. It's because you haven't done X or done Y or done Z. Let's get you going on that. So when we talk again in a month, that you're getting 2 out of 3 and then 3 out of 3. And suddenly, if you're showing people that they're getting the ROI that they signed up for, the conversation's a lot different versus just saying, here's your usage, how things going, open-ended and things like that.
So obviously when you're selling a service, right, like you said, you're selling an outcome, but oftentimes when you're not hitting those outcomes, you're nervous about talking about those outcomes because they're not getting those. So what advice would you give organizations in terms of being proactive to make sure that you're not talking about renewals when it's time for renewals, but actually setting the entire company, right? As the vendor, service provider, or as the customer, just being able to have those honest conversations very early in the engagement or relationship.
Yeah, I've got like when it's it's different throughout the phases of the customer journey. In the implementation phase, I have what's usually called a 2-week rule. And that's usually because most SaaS, we talked about the easy stuff where it's like, give us your users and you're up and loaded. That's like a 2-day implementation or something like that. Most SaaS are somewhere between 30 and 90 days. And then you've got the outliers with the bigger systems and things like that. So if you were thinking like a typical, to average that out, like a 60-day implementation period, if you're losing, if you tell your customer, go do these things, right? And they're supposed to go do them, or give us these files, send this over to us, show up to the weekly meeting, we'll go over things. They miss 1 week. Okay, that happens. People go on vacation or people get a little caught up. As soon as you hit 2 weeks, and that's the biggest flag out in the world for me. And I basically say, that's time to go escalate back up to the chain and say, listen, we thought you wanted these outcomes. Your person's not doing the thing. And sometimes it's usually that person needs to be given a break from some of their other duties. It's usually never that person's fault. It's usually, I've got 25 things to do, and this hasn't been told to me that this is my most important thing right now. And I'm like, sometimes it's like, you guys just paid $100,000 for this, right? And maybe like a, $10,000, $15,000 implementation fee that, goes away in 60 days. So, and that's why I like charging them, because you can use them as in these sort of conversations. And then say, let's get you to where your outcomes need to be. But it's also like, just tell us. You see so many passive people, especially in the startup realm, where they're so glad that people signed up for their software. They're afraid to reach back out after 2 weeks and like, they'll do it when they're ready. And then suddenly, like the cancellation, or suddenly they're not paying their bill. You see it all the time. It becomes a huge finance issue. Even if they're charging from the day of the signature, people will not make that payment if they don't feel like they're using their software. And you can get into all those collection things, but like, what are you going to do? You're going to sue your company for a client, right? You're going to go through all of that? No, you're not going to. So you're just going to deal with it. So,
yeah. So I think what you're describing is like you just can't wait until the problem.
Can't wait. You got to be. You have to be proactive. And the biggest problem I see in that part of the customer journey is teams are just not proactive enough. They are typically reactive, and they're not strategic in being proactive.
Makes sense. You mentioned GRR and RR in the SaaS world for tracking gross and net retention rates.
Yep.
But what are some key indicators that you can be measuring in the service world or in other sort of an application, in other sort of a service industry or something like that to track? Are you on the right path?
Yeah. So, as if it's a service and you've signed up for a project or certain things like that, then I don't want to get too deep into the professional services, like number types of things, but there's if you're billing, like what's your billable hours? Are you hitting capacity? Are you doing those types of things? I even on smaller type SaaS things, you should have an expected duration. I always say, okay, you've got a duration, but then you also have like a time to launch. People go for time to value. I hate that metric for this conversation. I think it's a great metric for other reasons, but I literally have this conversation weekly where people are like, oh, we need to get our implementation team to have a better time to value. I'm like, that's not a trackable number for an implementation team because it's squishy, right? A value is a very subjective measure versus like launch time is they signed up on this date and they launched on this date. That's not squishy. And so those are the types of things that we're looking for. If we're not getting into the regular outcomes based things and everything, but in services, it can be a little bit more hardcore about some of these types of duration and project based numbers that we're looking at.
Understood. So yeah, I mean, I think we're a HubSpot partner and we do HubSpot onboarding, and we often talk about the time to value a lot, because if you can get somebody to operate out of HubSpot, start doing some campaigns, if they're a marketing team or if they're a sales team, starting to actually do their sales activities, track their deals, and maybe even close 1 or 2 deals. In our world, that's, you're having, short time to value. But I do like what you're talking about, time to launch, because that's actually,
I could push right back on you. I could say, well, yes, but what if you've got customer A and they're paper-based? The second they load in their stuff, like, oh my God, this is amazing, I've never seen it. And then boom, their time to value is like second day. And then you've got somebody you're just converting over from maybe like a Zoho or whatever, system that's out there, Sugar or something like that. And then they're like, they've seen all of this. So they're like, we don't care about that's funny. Let me switch this and just say, if they're on one vendor, all they care about is not double paying. They want to get off that system and onto yours and not be paying for 2 vendors at one time. So the only time to value they're thinking about is not double paying usually.
Yeah. I'm just going to pause for 1 second.
Sure. Yeah.
I got to close my door. My little guy decided to just barge in here.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Oh, can't hear you yet.
Fun of working from home.
Oh, I know. I do try and find a coffee shop to well, obviously not for this type of conversation, but just to get out of the.
I know, but it's okay when I'm doing. But I should have just locked my door. I did not think about that.
Oh no, no worries.
But he's 3 years old. He doesn't understand. He just somehow barged right in here. But I lost my train of thought. Just trying to close that door.
We're
yeah. I think we're talking about just the measurements of what to measure. So let me just pause. Take it a bit. Obviously, there's a level of training and skills that's required from a retention standpoint, because most organizations are, they're sales oriented, like you said, a sales driven organization, all about, hey, how do we get more logo? But you got to have investment made to having the right team members that are focused on just the customer happiness aspect of it, the usage, the outcome, all of those things. What would you say to an organizational leader in terms of what they need to look for in terms of talent investment and training to make this a priority?
Yeah, I'm a big OJT, on the job training person as well, but there are some classes. There's such a cottage industry. You want to make sure you get the right thing. And if we're talking about customer success specifically, there's a company out there. I don't know if you've heard of them. I'm not affiliated. I just really like their stuff. It's called Success Hacker. Just very pragmatic. They've got a couple different layers of customer success, and it's something that you can map up to a model where you can say year 1, year 2, year 3, or different levels of CSMs and go from there. And they also do have like a course that you can send to them when they have to, a lot of startups have their CSMs also do their project management and implementation, and they've got something like that. So I always push companies in that direction. There are some other individual things, but I'm going to go a little rogue on some other things. There's, and that's like, the bones of doing the job, right? Like, everything we've talked about and how to make sure that you're doing the CSM A's and B's and C's that they need to be doing. But there are some softer or harder. I always mess that one up. There are some skills. I'll go there. And one's listening, which isn't a thing, right? And you always need to listen well. And I always say, go, if you know Bob London, for example, he's big in the customer success realm. And interesting story on him is he came from the marketing field, but his wife was in that field. And she was basically like, you need to teach these people how to listen better, right? And then he does a lot of sales training and everything. But like, if you have like quotas for EBRs or QBRs, people will just go out there and they're going to just do this blanket like spray and pray. Okay, I did 15 QBRs this week, and I show them the roadmap, right? And so he moves people into the more of a listening model, which is great. I also say I've had the most success bringing in that company's sales leader or somebody on the sales leadership team to give some of these soft skills training to, and especially if your customer success team has some element of renewal in some level of maybe upselling, and maybe not into a new business unit, but maybe a new module or something like that. And because the people that are out there talking about the value proposition that their software should do, they should be pretty well trained on your team on how to talk about the same thing, but once it's happened in the sale. They're out there trying to qualify a deal, seeing if it's a good deal because of the problems that they're trying to solve. That's why the internal meeting where they talk about why they bought the software is so important, the transition point. So I always say, hey, bring in your sales leader for an hour, do a lunch and learn, and just talk about how you would renew. If we had to hand renewals and upsells back over to the sales team, how would they approach it and things like that. So those are some of my in my toolbox always recommendations that I'm doing.
Yeah, I was always told that the salespeople make the best
absolutely.
account reps and customer success because they kind of know how to handle some of the objections. They know how to uncover pain, and they can actually go dig a little deeper if they needed to find the root cause, right? And not just like some surface level information that's, I will just send you a knowledge base article on how to fix that problem.
I do want to preface that I'm a little bit more pragmatic, and when I say a little, like a lot more pragmatic, because listen, are there amazing things out there like Winning by Design and these really big, thick frameworks? Absolutely. I do work with more companies that are in the $5 million to $100 million range. Yeah, when they start getting over 50 into 70, they start looking into companies like that and everything. But usually when they see like those big, thick, heavy models that make them all lots of money and longer engagements, they don't want that, right? It takes too long. It's complicated, X, Y, and Z. You need some runway to be able to apply those types of things. So they're usually not interested in those. Instead of doing like a 1-day workshop, it turns into like a week. So I don't recommend those things normally for the smaller companies. So I'm sure those companies, ICPs are also probably a little higher than the easy startups and things like that. So
I read some content by Jacko from the bow tie funnel and the Winning by Design.
Yeah, it's all great stuff. I just try and make it a little bit more applicable. I've kind of skimmed off a lot. I do a lot of these as well, kind of off menu. You have to ask kind of like a Starbucks thing if we're having a coffee metaphor, but like it's secret language. And, focus more things on a jobs to be done framework. So some of the things that I actually train teams on, if I'm in an engagement and trying to get the right principles out of them, are what are the jobs that the customer is trying to do? What's the ROI that they're trying to get? And what are the blockers that are preventing them or preventing you from doing it? Usually that can be a 2-hour-long sticky note types of exercise. That can bring a lot to you. So I basically say, go watch a video on jobs to be done and let's do one of these sort of sticky note exercises an hour. And then you know what your customers are trying to do and what their pain points are, and then how you're going to address that with your software.
Understood. Now that you're building this service company, what are some of the things you're proactively doing to increase retention of your customers?
I actually do like an anti-retention model. My philosophy is that I don't want to give them the chiropractic approach where they feel like they constantly have to come back to us and whatnot. I'm happy to, but we try and listen, I very early on in my career, we had the big consultants come in and they'd charge a lot of money to basically come in and give you another price tag, right? They like, how big's the problem? Okay, so we're going to charge you some money to figure out how big the problem is, and then we're going to come back with your problem's this big, right? And so that always drove me bananas. So if we are kind of consistently working with the same type of companies, seeing the same range of problems, then we will get a lot of pattern recognition so we can solve these problems faster, because the problem isn't identifying what the problem is. The problem is the execution. Anybody could read any one of our, me or my competitors or all the people that are out there blog posts and read LinkedIn. You get a pretty good idea of what you need to be doing. The problem is how do we apply this to our company, right? So maybe my answer is that we try and just give everything that a company needs to feel self-sufficient. And if they need our help later, they're going to reach back out to us or ask us for a second phase. But I believe in here's a manual that you need to go do. Let us know if you need any help executing on it. And that's how we do it. So maybe we could make some more if we held some stuff back and said, reach us out, if you need some more help. But our belief is, this comes after all those experiences that I told you about. If you're paying us to come in and analyze a problem, we want to give you a manual to go fix that. And we'll get more customers from referral than a company coming back saying that was too complicated. I'm not sure what to do. Can you come back in or something?
So what are some of those problems that the companies are having when they need to start thinking, okay, I got to call Jeff at Infinite Renewals?
I see, obviously when you're at 5 million, it's a different problem than when you're at 100 million. But there are certain activities or certain things that pop up, and I don't want to turn into an advertisement, but I will say, your retention's definitely hurting, right? You're below your lowest quartile for what you need to be doing. Like, go to either OpenView or benchmark it and see where you need to be for your company's ACV and ARR. And if you're below those numbers, it's usually, or your board has started saying something to you. So you're usually having a lower retention. You're having a failure to launch problem. You're having customer satisfaction, or if you're tracking that, you're having lower customer satisfaction scores. Or you're kind of going through an event. We do work with a lot of private equity companies, and they're kind of bringing together a bunch of different companies to have an all-encompassing solution. But, suddenly, 4 companies making 9 million, they don't all operate like a $50 million company. So they need some guidance on some of that. Those are the typical things that we're bumping into. And every element of post-sale that we touch versus just saying like a customer success problem. It could be services, it could be implementation, it could be support, a little bit on education. Or then the last one that we've actually seen a ton of this year is bringing in like a digital solution, because you need to help out customers on a one-to-many ratio versus, as I said, loading up, okay, we need 25 CSMs because we have 20,000 customers paying us $500 each, right? That's not scalable.
Understood. So what are some of those digital tech stack that you would invest, you would tell companies to invest? Yeah,
this is when I think you start needing a customer success platform. I'm agnostic. I do have 1 or 2 that I like a little bit more, but I'm not going to mention them here. But any tool that can essentially, where you can create a health score based on a variety of factors that's usually individual to you, but there's some element of usage, there's some element of support tickets and things like that. What most companies usually do is that they're treating everybody in a white glove, which is great, but then it gets to a point where that's not scalable. So we go through and basically open up and document their white glove support tier, not support, but service level, and then just start removing the stuff and replacing it with digital. Everybody always just thinks it's email. Definitely need that. It does look more like a support model than a customer success model. You might be using something like a Zendesk or a Service Hub or something like that. But you also need some other pillars for that. If you're not able to have weekly meetings or EBRs and QBRs, we always say have a weekly Ask Me Anything session, and make sure that if you've got a global time base of customers. Sometimes it's early in the morning, sometimes it's late in the day or something like that. So you can hit that globally. Community's big. People can go in, they can start helping out fellow customers. It can also start exposing things in a more visible manner that other elements of your company can look into. So you got the sort of the email, whether it's people filing issues and getting back to them, or, breaking out support versus customer success. But then also, and we go back and we look to our commerce friends, how are they addressing scalability? And I always say, look at Grammarly. Look at Spotify. You get that email. You see how you're using the product, and we try and find models where you're doing that programmatically on a scaling digital basis for hundreds of thousands of customers. And this is what the large companies like your Monday.coms and your Smartsheets and all of these sort of big user models are doing, where they've found a way to message back the ROI in an email to people. And then a good CTA of basically saying, hey, if you want to know more, book a meeting, but you're not making it dependent to see that ROI on a meeting, which was sort of the old school way. We're going to bring in, we've got 60 minutes. We make sure we've got 58 slides and we're going to come in and read them all, right? Like it's a different model these days. So,
yeah, actually we use a tool called Avoma, which is a competitive gong. It actually has an ROI tab that shows me how much in total hours I saved by not having to take notes or recap
exactly
emails.
Right. And there are some tools that are out there now. I was begging for something like this before because you were always dependent on a dev team building this, but there is a tool out there called Matic, I believe, Matik. And my philosophy on that is, imagine a customer raised their hand and said, we're churning. We're moving over to a competitor. Okay, you have failed your job. And you had to put that one big report together with all the usage and all this. And I'm like, okay, we've all have to do that, and probably once a month or something like that. So why not save those queries, plug it into a tool that can just then output those on a more programmatic basis and get those to your company so that they can see the ROI. And that's what people really need to be doing, and not loading up on more and more CSMs and things like that.
Makes sense. Yeah, obviously we can talk a lot about customer success and retention, and appreciate you sharing a lot of your insights. More of a personal question, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give younger Jeff?
Kasana, what I sort of did to my daughters. So I have three daughters, and they're all, one's a freshman in college now. And, what do they want to get into, which is sort of, I got into computers very early. I didn't want to do the whole resume read, but I was a developer that just talked too much, but I was a developer, right? And so even though I only was a developer for a few years, it was back in the old school days of having to understand a lot of architecture, which I still have kept up on, right? And I can still talk about microservices and all that stuff and everything. So when my oldest daughter came to me and she said, hey, I'm interested in marketing. I said, that's great. But what's really powerful, and what will be even more powerful, is understanding the numbers and the data behind the marketing, right? So I got her interested in data science, which she said, I don't want to go down the data science route, but got really interested in computer science. And now she's out there writing, we were decoding during her break some of her Python and things like that. And she's writing chatbots as a freshman. And I think everybody should at least understand that's the world these days. I mean, AI is definitely at a very frenzied pace and everything, but it is definitely where the world is heading. So knowing how that works and how that can apply can only help. And so that's sort of what I'm saying is, like, follow that path, understand how these systems work and they talk to each other. You'll always have a job, essentially.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, I certainly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your lessons you've learned by building some of these companies. Where can people hear more about you?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest place, right? Hopefully you'll probably put a tag to that. Our website's Infinite Renewals, but I definitely drive people back to LinkedIn from there. And that's the best place where we're always sharing all of these things. Follow us and you'll learn a lot, at least anything, an occasional funny meme or something like that. So
awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS. a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.